Hello, everybody. It's your favorite absentee YouTuber, Lord Wallace, here to talk about something that's been mulling in my mind ever since I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. And yeah, it's about Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now, I'm not going to specifically address my issues with this game in this particular video or what I think of the game, whether I'm buying it, whether I'm not. I don't really have beef with anybody who thinks they're really going to enjoy this game and they're going to buy it, they're going to play it. More power to you. Let me just get that disclaimer out of the way. But most of my thoughts on the actual game itself are already summed up on my Twitter post. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at LordGodWallace. The link will be in the description, and I'll also be putting in the description another video by Mecha, another YouTuber that I have really grown fond of over the past couple of years. He made a video about Sword and Shield. He's mainly like a Fire Emblem dude, but he made a video about it, and his take on it very well summarizes mine. But what I want to talk about in this video, basically how the Pokemon community might have shot itself in the foot, and this was pointed out to me, again, by a good friend, because I think an argument that I might have conceded too early in, maybe debates about Let's Go, for example, is if you look at some of my videos, I think I really only made one video about Pokemon Let's Go and my sort of concerns about it, and I immediately conceded to this idea that, even if a few people personally don't buy the game, that Game Freak doesn't listen to feedback that isn't related to sales. Until a friend pointed out to me the one time that Game Freak demonstrably sort of did listen to player feedback, and even like old guard, old player feedback, and that's when Black and White and Black and White 2 released, when Gen 5 happened. I didn't remember this too well at the time because back in like 2010, when Black and White had, released, I was still kind of young. That was almost 10 years ago for me. I might have been like 14, 15 years old. So I didn't really recall well the backlash to the changes and the innovations, I guess, that those games made. Not that they were huge innovations, but this was definitely a stage where Game Freak was more ambitious with how they wanted to progress the series, and a lot of the older fans kind of took that as them being forgotten. And I think because of that, I guess the general thesis of this video is that the backlash to Black and White and Black and White 2 and how those games handled their main campaigns is what led to the over-pandering of old fan sensitivities in XY and, Sun and Moon, and that led to like the whole meme of Charizard being really overrepresented in Sword and Shield. But I guess what a lot of the fans that complained about that, myself included, didn't realize is that was our fault too. We shot ourselves on our own foot back when 5th Gen was being released, and we complained about, for example, Black and White's main campaign only having Unova Pokemon. That was something that we were really up in arms and upset about, when it was actually a very ambitious move on Game Freak's part compared to what's going on right now that we are just complaining about all the same. Oh, and another thing that I probably should have mentioned before is apparently in X and Y, the first wild Pokemon encounter that you can get into is always rigged to be a Pidgey. If you're like I don't know if this refers to like a specific type of grass you have to be in, but there's an encounter in X and Y at the beginning of the game that's rigged to always be a Pidgey. And I didn't even know that until just yesterday, so that wasn't part of the conversation I had with my friend. I think I read that on a YouTube comment somewhere. But yeah, apparently that's a thing, just in case you were skeptical of Game Freak's absolute commitment to pandering to nostalgia in X and Y compared to some of the previous generations. So there you go. Next, I should probably get to talking about why I have this graph up here. So these are the sales numbers in millions for each of the Pokemon games, and games that are just counterparts of each other and aren't like third versions, like, Gold, Silver, they're all grouped into one category, obviously. So I checked this just to kind of verify and stack up how Gen 5 actually did in sales compared to the other Pokemon games. And as you can see here, it's not even really like Gen 5 sold that much worse than the other generations. I mean, it sold better than some. I mean, Black and White sold about just as well as Sun and Moon, XY, and Ruby Sapphire, selling only a little bit less than Diamond Pearl, really. Black and White 2, for being like a third version kind of game, actually sold more than Crystal and Emerald. So, as you can see here, despite the backlash of old guard players, the games did not even really sell that bad, and yet Game Freak still listened to them with the Gen 1 or the previous gen pandering that kind of goes on in X, Y, or Sun and Moon. And understand, I'm not even necessarily saying this is a bad thing, but you can go overboard with it. And I think at this point, Game Freak has figured out that if they just continue doing some of this pandering, or a lot of this pandering, they can basically take the fans who complained here for complete granted as they put out just another kind of par or subpar product. And that's kind of our fault for that. That we, I guess my grander point is that here, when Game Freak was still trying to be kind of ambitious with new features and better story, we said, nah, screw that, fuck that. We just want to see Charizard and that's it. And that's what led to all of this right here. And that was an interesting thing I wanted to talk about, because these games did not even sell that bad to warrant such a response. And I know some of you might think I'm being kind of harsh, saying that, these games weren't ambitious at all compared to Black and White, and that's not exactly what I'm saying. Hindsight is 2020 with these things, and certainly at the time that X and Y came out, it had the appearance of being something really ambitious, like for example with Mega Evolutions, but even the more skeptical fans at the time didn't realize that this would just become the beginning of this trend of hollow gimmicks, hollow and arbitrary gimmicks being tossed at us every generation, only to get dropped once the new gimmick is introduced. It doesn't feel very inspired the way that Black and White, for example, tried to do a better story and more fleshed out characters instead. It's certainly not literature quality, but it was a step up and something new that Game Freak wanted to try, that fans just kind of rejected. A lot of people, including myself now, have started to compare this trend of generational battle gimmicks to what Yu-Gi-Oh's doing with extra deck summoning mechanics, where, every few years when a new anime comes out or a new set of cards comes out, it's coupled with a new extra deck summoning gimmick, and every few years that gimmick will eventually be replaced by another new gimmick with another new anime or some other merch they need to promote with this facade of freshness and something new. And then the old gimmick just kind of gets tossed aside and support for it is cut off. Is that starting to sound a little familiar? Yeah, Mega Evolutions. We really thought that going forward in 6th gen, because we don't have, omniscient foresight, obviously, we thought that this mechanic would have some kind of permanence that would stick with Pokemon going forward. But now, any hope of Game Freak actually making any new Mega Evolutions for fan favorites that were speculated to have future Mega Evolutions, just toss that all out the window. They're going full Yu-Gi-Oh with this, and now it's just, it's Dynamax now, no mention of Z-moves, no mention of Mega Evolutions. Toss that shit out the window. We're in with the new now. And support for all the rest is seemingly cut off. And I don't know, something about that just seems very shallow. There's no permanence, no consistency. It all seems very arbitrary too. But I guess you can't really blame them, can you? When they try to make actual progression and actual substance with their choices in terms of innovating for the series, like a good story and having the campaign be all new Pokemon and save the old Pokemon for later, we threw it back in their faces and said, no, fuck you. And so now they're just saying, okay, well, we're just going to have old Pokemon get Ooga Booga bigger and stronger, and apparently we like that shit. So that's what we're going to get. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, but we made the bed that we're sleeping in right now. We shot ourselves in the foot. We shot ourselves in the foot, and now I guess we want to complain about it. That's fine. I certainly am very vocal about the game's quality or seemingly lack of it on Twitter. But we gotta be careful with what feedback that we give to Game Freak. And this is why I keep telling people, like, they do listen. These games did not sell badly, but they care about how the optics of their fan base look. They don't want to have fans complaining. And that's why I think, like, if you don't think Dexit is going to have an impression, you might want to look back at the precedents. You might want to look back. Because this shit happened. They put a fucking Pidgey, a rigged Pidgey encounter. They gave Charizard like 10 forms. That's how much of an impression that backlash to this made, and it still sold 15 million copies. So just something for you to think about going forward.